Hello and welcome to Tech Deals. The supers are here. Insert an Incredibles reference if you wish. The 2060, 2070, and 2080 Super RTX 20 series cards from NVIDIA. Detailed benchmarks including the video footage of the games themselves, as well as a ton of charts, dollar cost per frame per second, percentage performance improvements charts, and more. All three resolutions benchmark 1080p, 1440p, and 4K. If you came here only interested in benchmarks and not my analysis, I hope you want to listen, but if you only want the benchmarks, this timestamp up here, fast forward the video, and you can certainly watch those if you're interested. Otherwise, sit back, relax, grab a cup of coffee. I have a few things to say. Before that, this video is sponsored by Dashlane. Dashlane is the all-in-one password management, digital wallet, VPN, and dark web monitoring service all rolled into one. You know you should be using complex, unique passwords for every site you log into, but that's ridiculous. Nobody is going to manually type in 16-digit long random strings of letters and numbers into the 250 sites that they use. Enter Dashlane. Dashlane is a wonderful service that does it for you automatically, both entering them and logging you in with one click, as well as auto-generating complex passwords for every site that you use. Dashlane works on desktops, laptops, and mobile devices, and in addition to complex, unique passwords, it'll also fill in all of your form fields, including payment information if you wish. The VPN allows you to safely use public Wi-Fi hotspots while encrypting your data, and it also allows you to access all of your accounts from anywhere. Dashlane is free to use on one device. Use my link in the video description below to download and sign up today. You also get a 30-day free trial of Dashlane Premium, no credit card required. Try it across unlimited devices, and if you love the service, use the code TECHDEALS for 10% off your subscription. Okay, now back to the show. Almost exactly 1 year ago, NVIDIA launched the RTX 20 series line, consisting of the 2060, 70, 80, and a rare event for NVIDIA, the 2080 Ti, at the same time as the main launch. In previous generations, the 910 series, they waited 6 months, 9 months, whatever, to launch the Ti, the top-end card. But this time around, we got it right at launch for the royal price of $1,000, or at least that was the recommended price. The reality is $1,200 has been the typical board price since launch, and it really hasn't gone down since. You can, however, find the non-super cards on sale. The 2060 non-super has been available occasionally in the past couple of months for right around $300. I recently spotted one for $289 on Amazon, although that was just a one-day special, and it was a very basic non-factory overclock card, and $20 buys you a much better card, as I have tweeted about numerous times when the good ones have gone on sale. Now, there are two overview videos worth watching if you want to know which one should you buy. Which RTX 2060 and which RTX 2080 should you buy? Both of those are detailed comparisons, temperatures, sound tests, etc., game performance, overclocking testing. I will link to those down in the video description below. Everything in those two videos applies to this. I've had several people ask me, when are you going to do a which super should you buy, where I get like 6 different cards of one GPU and test them. I'm not going to do that. The differences are trivial and minor. Watch those videos. Everything in the which 2060 video should you buy applies to the 2060 and 2070. Everything in the which 2080 should you buy applies to the 2080 and the 2080 Ti, and of course all the supers. These cards are not a radical departure, or at least the 2070 and 2080 super cards are not. The 2060 super is the interesting one here because of the VRAM change, which we'll talk about in just a second. So if you're interested in more details behind the cards and the testing, go watch my original videos, because these cards launched a year ago. The supers are a refresh, and frankly, a pretty minor refresh at that. I don't want to say that NVIDIA is just trying to get another news cycle out of everybody. I'm making a video about it, so I guess it worked. But they're kind of trying to get another news cycle out of everybody. Now, in fairness, NVIDIA is not the only one who does this. Intel has done this repeatedly with minor refreshes of CPUs. Kaby Lake over Skylake, for example, which was essentially the same chips with a clock speed bump. AMD did it with their RX 480 to 580 to 590, which are all the same GPU with minor changes and minor clock speed bumps, but otherwise basically the same card. So NVIDIA is by no means the only company guilty of doing this. However, I do have to give them credit. The 2060 Super is a nice improvement. It has 8 gigabytes of GDDR6 instead of 6. The non-2060 Super has 6 gigabytes. The non-2060 Super has 192-bit memory, and this has 256-bit. It has more memory bandwidth, and it has more of it. Of all the changes here, the 2060 Super is one that legitimately makes a difference, and it's much more noticeable, especially if you play at 1440p. The 2060 I always considered a great 1080p card. I know not everybody agrees, but with its 192-bit memory interface, its slower VRAM, its reduced VRAM, I think the non-Super makes an excellent 1080p card for the next 3+ years. Today it plays games at 1440p, but it doesn't have 3+ years of 1440p in front of it. The 2060 Super is a much better 1440p card because of its faster VRAM, its bigger memory bus, and the fact that it simply has more VRAM for larger textures. The 2070 Super and 2080 Super are this close to the non-Super versions. They do have more compute units. In fact, all of these cards have more physical shaders on them than the non-Super versions. But the difference is really, really minor. If you're sitting here thinking, well, they upped the compute units, it's going to be faster because it's got more shader cores and it's got more onboard resources. It is such a minor difference. It's like taking a 300 horsepower car and making it have 310 horsepower. Yes, it has more power, but so what? You'll never notice that level of difference. The VRAM is faster, especially on the 2080 Supers. It now has the new 16 gigabit per second Samsung VRAM as opposed to the old 14 gigabit per second VRAM, although it's actually clocked at 15.5 due to the board partners wanting to keep their boards the same. And in fact, the board companies use the exact same board designs. They didn't want to have to redesign their boards, so that's why they did that. So it is faster VRAM. But does it really make a difference? Well, as I noted, if you just came here for the benchmark charts, well, I've got them all benchmarked. I've got the non-Supers, the 2080 Ti for comparison. All of that is later in the video. And you could talk about specs and memory bit rates and memory clock speeds until you're blue in the face. I don't typically dive deep into the tech aspects of cards. You can find that stuff on AnandTech and other excellent review websites where you can view charts and tables until you are literally blue in the face. I figure you come here because you want my analysis and you want my real-world perspective on things. And here's what I want to know. How much do the cards cost? How fast do they run my games? And are they cool and quiet? Pretty much that's it. I mean, do they do the job? As far as what nanometer production process they're on, how many transistors they have, how many teraflops of compute performance do they have, personally, I kind of don't care. I mean, it's interesting from a tech point of view. I do read AnandTech's articles, for example. I read several other tech websites for their deep dives and their charts, and I find it interesting. But that doesn't change the frame rate of your game. A 2070 Super is faster than a 2070, but not by much. It's a small change. The other interesting point that's worth considering, NVIDIA did not discontinue the non-Super 2060. They still make and still sell the regular RTX 2060. It now has a suggested retail price of $349, but none of them are that price. You can find tons of them for less than that. As I mentioned, you can find several around the $300, $310 price, especially with a mail-in rebate. I've seen several of the factory overclock cards in the $310 to $320 range with a mail-in rebate. That's not bad. The Super 2060 retails for $400. That's a little bit more than the non-Super version started out at, but again, it has 8 gigabytes of RAM, it's faster, and it's a much better 1440p card. NVIDIA has discontinued the non-Super versions of the 2070 and 2080. There are still some left on store shelves. You can still go on to Newegg or Amazon and find a few of them. But what's out there is out there, and that's it. That's all there's ever going to be because the price points of these stayed the same. $500 was the regular 2070. $500 is the new 2070 Super. $700 was the 2080. $700 is the 2080 Super. So because of that, they just discontinued the old cards and put them in their place. They're a few percentage points faster, so if you were going to buy a card and the prices are the same, by all means. But if you find a deal Right now, you can find these for about $450. All the links will be down in the video description below, as in all of my videos. If by chance this is the first video you've ever come to, check out the video description below. There will be a ridiculous number of links down there. But that's because I don't do a lot of sponsor stuff on my channel. I depend upon you guys using my links for shopping because those are affiliate links. They support the channel regardless of what you buy. Intel, AMD, NVIDIA, makes no difference to me. I encourage you to buy a good deal. But whatever it is, it supports the channel when you use those down below. So please consider doing that if you are able to. In any case, so $450, so about $50 less. Is it worth it? Well, that's why I have dollar cost per frame per second charts, because I priced the non-super card here at $450, and then again the non-2080 super at a relative price, which I'll mention when we get to the charts. A word of note to head off all the AMD fans. I do like AMD cards. I've done a number of videos recommending them. You will not find the RX 5700 XT or any of the other AMD cards in this video. It's not the point. I have done videos, linked in the video description below, comparing the 2060 Super, the 2070 Super, and the 5700 XT. There's no need to repeat it. So none of the AMD cards are going to be in the charts you're about to see. I could put 27 GPUs in there and it would be so cluttered it would be difficult to read everything. I do realize that there are other channels to do that, and that's certainly fine, but I try to keep things simple, and this video is all about which high-end NVIDIA card should you buy from the 2060 all the way through the 2080 Ti. If you clutter it up with a bunch of other cards, then the charts become difficult to read, and my goal is to make the charts readable, not just on those with huge ultra-wide 35-inch monitors, but for those of you actually looking at the charts on, say, a cell phone or a tablet, which many of you do. So this is an excellent card. It's an excellent value. And if you want to see a comparison of it to NVIDIA, I have those videos down below, but this is not that video, which is why it's not here. I do have some more thoughts I want to share with you about these cards and about the future of video cards, but I will save that for after the benchmarks. I've talked for certainly long enough. For now, let's get to the benchmarks, and I will see you guys on the flip side. First up, we have Assassin's Creed Odyssey. These are at 1440p instead of 1080p. In the previous multi-GPU comparisons, I was doing all 1080p, but the truth is, if you're looking at a super level card, you may very well be looking at 1440p resolution. It's a balance between 1080p and 4K, so here you go. The one downside to showing you 1440p is the MSI Afterburner numbers are quite small. When I benchmarked these, I did not change the physical size of the MSI Afterburner numbers, which makes them fairly small in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. I would appreciate your feedback as to what you guys think. Do you like 1440p for these cards? Can you read it on the screen? Should I just skip the actual recordings of the benchmarks and just show you the charts? Put your comments down in the comment section below and let me know what you guys think. If you watch this, and of course you may want to go back and rewatch it after listening to me speak there, but the real-time performance numbers up there pretty much tell the tale. You're going to see the chart here in just a second, but the difference between those cards is not huge. Now on the screen, I had the 2070, 2080, and 2070 Super and 2080 Super. But here we have 7 cards, and I included the 3 on both ends to bracket it. 80 frames per second on the low end at 1080p with the 2060, all the way up to 113 frames per second. But at 1440p, we have 62 to 91. That is definitely not double the frame rate. It is, however, double the frame rate at 4K, but if you're 4K and you want to play these sorts of games, a 2060 would be a bit silly. Coming back to 1440p, I want to point out how compressed the performance is between a 2060 Super, 2070, 2070 Super, 2080, and 2080 Super. 71 to 71 to 77 to 78 to 83. It's even less exciting with the minimum frame rates, where they're not even 10 frames per second apart between all of those cards. It sounds really impressive to look at all these cards, but there's a big sort of uneven dead space in the middle where there's not a huge difference. Moving on to Far Cry New Dawn, the full-priced paid DLC of Far Cry 5. Oops, did text say that out loud? Yes, he did. And here we have, again, the RTX 2070 in the upper left-hand corner, the 2070 Super in the upper right, the 2080 in the bottom left, and the 2080 Super in the bottom right. You can see the real-time performance numbers. The more expensive cards are faster. I know, big surprise. But it's not a huge difference. It's real, but it very much depends upon what's important to you. If you have a 1440p, and again, these are at 1440p, if you have a 1440p 144Hz display, and those are no longer expensive, $250 will buy you a 1440p 144Hz display, then you might need a powerful graphics card if you want to play games like Far Cry New Dawn at high refresh rates at 1440p. Now, this game is primarily why I switched to 1440p for the on-screen benchmark information, because take a look at this. At 1080p, there's only 109 for the $300 2060 to 130 for the $1,100 2080 Ti. That's kind of ridiculous. But at 1440p, we do see a larger difference. Not doubling, but still 81 to 124 is a noticeable jump. And there is a larger stair-step of performance here, but it still isn't that great. 95 frames per second on a 2070, 104 on a 2070 Super, 109, 114 on the 2080s. I mean, sure, it's like, whoa, hey, it's faster. Look, see the chart, the numbers bigger. How many in the audience think you'll tell the difference between 95 and 114 in the real world when you don't have a frame rate counter on the screen? How about a difference between 75 and 94? Okay, fair enough, but those are minimum, 75 to 94, but there's a huge price discrepancy there. $450 to $700, that's a lot of money for 20 frames per second. Gears 5, again, 1440p, ultra detail, same 4 cards on the screen. I'm not showing you the other 3 cards because I've shown those in other videos. Well, actually, I haven't shown the 2080 Ti in another video, but you get the point in any case. Now, these frame rates are definitely lower than the last game, and it just goes to show that on the latest and greatest games, it does take a lot of graphics power to keep up. But again, this is at ultra detail. If you turn detail settings down or make adjustments or tweak them, then you can definitely get better overall performance. As it stands, there's clearly a difference here, just not a monstrously huge one, especially given the $450 current price of a 2070 and the $700 current price of a 2080 Super. Unlike the last game, however, you will see a difference at 1080p, which very much comes back to my ongoing refrain of it depends. What game are you playing? What detail setting? What resolution? It makes so much difference. 84 to 144 at 1080p. This is a huge difference at 1080p and just goes to show when you have a graphics card bound game, you really will see the difference. At 1440p, the 2070 was at 70 frames per second and the 2080 Super was at 88 frames per second. That is 18 frames per second more for several $100s. Whether it's worth it or not is up to you, but not to worry, I'll have dollar cost per frame per second charts here in just a minute. But yeah, and of course, if you want to play at 4K, well, the 2080 Ti exists for a reason. Here you can see the 2080 Ti does not even maintain 60 frames per second at a minimum, but it does come pretty close. The minimums drop off pretty far at 4K for all the other cards, however, but extremely playable at 1440p. And again, change the detail settings, tweak them a bit, and you'll get a nice solid boost to performance. Ghost Recon Wildlands. I'm not showing you Breakpoint because I benchmarked these just before Breakpoint came out. The public beta was actually running when I ran these tests, which gives you an idea of when I ran them, but it was very recently, but it just wasn't quite released. And so when I went through all these cards, I had to pick something. Ghost Recon Breakpoint is going to be a bit more demanding and a little bit slower than this, just kind of like Far Cry New Dawn is just a little bit more demanding and a little bit slower than Far Cry 5. It's based on the same engine, but of course, they always throw in extra tweaks and effects and stuff because shinies, graphics sell games, even though good gameplay should sell games. But let's be honest, Great graphics sells games. If it didn't, they wouldn't keep pushing the envelope to get everybody to buy these nice, fancy, super duper wonderful, expensive graphics cards and buy new games to say, look at my computer, it does such photorealistic games. Now we just need some good gameplay. Although this is a really good game. I've beaten this game. This game is an absolute blast. It is worth noting we are not at ultra detail. Ultra detail is crushing in this. I have it set to very high. I put in the chart what detail settings. Some I turned to ultra, some I did very high depending upon the experience I have with it. If you have a 1440p 144 hertz refresh rate monitor and you want to get that kind of speed out of games like this, well, you'll have to turn the detail down to high, which helps a little bit, but not tremendously, and you'll have to buy all the computer because even a 2080 Ti doesn't do 144. But if you've got a 60 hertz monitor, well then, yeah, you're great, frankly, with any of these cards. The minimums don't drop tremendously, and it's very smooth on any of these cards in actual live gameplay. Well, not quite 4K unless you've got a good one, but it's there. Shadow of the Tomb Raider, everyone's favorite controversial RTX/DLSS game example. Now, since we have no AMD cards here, you can't complain about that. Well, you can, but it won't do any good. I had it turned on when it was possible. It's worth noting that the 2080 and 2080 Super do not let you run it at 1080p. So it's off for those, but it doesn't matter because it's still going to win there because the card has plenty of performance. It's not really resolution reduction than image sharpening. It is and it isn't, but it's selective on the screen. This isn't the place for that argument. Regardless, this game scales really well across these cards. Spend more, get more if you have the budget. At 1080p, even the lowly 2060 does 97 frames per second. Now that is with DLSS on. I fully acknowledge that it'll be a little bit slower if you don't. At 1440p, again, 73 frames per second. Very, very nice. At 4K, thanks to DLSS, notice that even our mid-range cards, the 2070 and 2070 Super, are playable at 60 frames per second. Now, that's an average. It's going to be lower than that. But if you don't mind turning it on, you certainly can. But 1440p really is the sweet spot for most of these cards. 5-game average across all 3 resolutions and all 7 cards. Taking a look at just the 2070 and 2070 Super, which are just $50 apart at the moment, at 1080p, you're looking at 105 and 115, 10 frames per second. At 1440p, you're looking at 81 to 89, 8 frames per second difference. And at 4K, which, okay, for esports gaming and casual gaming is fine, but for these games, it's not, 48 to 53, which is a fairly small difference. On the 2080 and 2080 Super, you're going from 118 to 124 at 1080p. That's a pretty small, trivial difference. At 1440p, you're going from 93 to 98. Raise your hands if you think you can tell the difference between 93 and 98 outside of a benchmark. Put your hand down. No, you can't. That is a rounding error. It is such a small difference to make the Super completely meaningless. It really is such a very, very small and trivial difference. This chart shows you the percentage improvement of each card over the base of a 2060. So a 2070 Super at 1080p average frame rate is 24% faster than a 2060. Those of you playing the home game will already know that's a terrible deal. A 2080 Super is 134% faster than a 2060 at 1080p. The numbers improve a bit at 1440p, but not by much. A 2070 Super is only 30% faster than a 2060 at 1440p. Now the question is, do you get enough frame rates out of a 2060 in order to make it work? But for a fairly decent chunk of money, you're not getting a fairly decent chunk of performance. The 2080 Super is nice at 43% faster, but again, it's double the price. $700 versus $300 and change. That's a lot of money for a 43% improvement. Things look better at 4K, but who's buying a 2060 to play at 4K anyway? Yes, I know you can. Absolutely. Overwatch is absolutely amazing and incredible at 4K on a 2060, but we're not looking at Overwatch here now, are we? 55% improvement on a 2080 Super. The gap between a 2070 and a 2080 and the Super variants increases the higher resolution because we're totally graphics card bound. Take a look at that 2080 Ti, 91% faster. This is where that card shines. It's still not a deal, but if you want to play at 4K and you want to play modern AAA games at 4K, you kind of almost have to buy a 2080 Ti. It really is the peak of current performance until the 3080 Ti comes out, in which case you'll have to buy that as well. 4K gaming is expensive. Dollar cost per frame per second. This is the current best price of all these cards divided by their average frame rate at each resolution. This is 1080p. Yes, the 2080 Ti is a terrible value for the money at 1080p. I don't think anybody thought otherwise. However, the rest of the cards are basically a small stair step of premium for having a nicer, better card. The real value stops at the 2060, maybe the 2060 Super. Everything above that costs more for the premium performance that you're getting. In other words, it's not an even level, well, just spend $100 more and get $100 worth of performance. It's spend $100 more and get $70 worth of performance, or spend $200 more and get $150 worth of performance. And that reduces the further up that you go. Moving to 1440p, it levels out a little bit because you start to get a larger percentage difference between the cards. A 2070 Super is a reasonable value for 1440p AAA gaming because you need that extra performance. A 2060 might be cheaper, but it isn't by much. $4.52 versus $5.61 is not a huge difference. You are paying a 20% price premium per frame per second, roughly. Actually, not even that, but you need it. I mean, if you want to play the latest and greatest games at 1440p, a 2060 is really kind of weak in that department, so you kind of have to pay a bit more. The 2080 Super is a much worse deal than the 2070 Super is, and of course, the 2080 Ti is for those who are not price sensitive. Although, if you want to play at 144 frames per second, yeah, you might need one. At 4K, the numbers compress even further. The 2080 Ti is still not the deal, but it almost is in the sense of if you want to have an enjoyable experience and you've already bought premium super components, what the heck? In for a penny, in for a pound, and just go get yourself the best. A 2080 Super will work at 4K, especially if Gears 5 and the very latest, greatest games aren't on your agenda, or you're okay to adjust detail. Set them to high, and then maybe turn off shadows, or turn down shadows, or turn a few things down. It will make a difference. The 2070 Super will do it, but really, I think the extra money at this level, if you're really wanting to play games at 4K, you kind of sort of have entered the rarefied air of being not the value buyer, but the premium buyer, and you got to work your way up the chart. As far as the 2060 goes, I recently did a video on an RX 580 at 4K gaming. Depending upon the games you play, a 2060 Super would actually be a great 4K card if you drop all the latest AAA games. If you're just going to play esports games, casual games, World of Warships, World of Tanks, Overwatch, etc. Actually, a 2060 Super would be phenomenal at 4K for all of that stuff. Well, that was a whole bunch of charts and a whole bunch of information, and yes, this video did take me a lot of hours to make between running the benchmarks, putting together the charts, filming this, editing it, uploading it. If you like my content and for whatever reason are unable to use the affiliate links in the video description below, I understand. Maybe you're not in the United States, maybe you just prefer buying locally. There's two other ways to support the channel which would be greatly appreciated. Number one is Patreon. For $2 per month, you can click on the link down below and directly support the channel on Patreon. I do post early access to the charts. The charts that you saw here in the video were posted a week early over on Patreon for those who were interested in seeing them. You also get access to the Tech Deals private Discord. We've got about a dozen private channels and a great community over there. For $2 a month, you get access to both. Your support is greatly appreciated. If you can do $5 per month, join Floatplane, also in the description below. Floatplane is the early access private video service run by Linus Media Group, and you basically get early access to all the videos. This video was up for several days before it was available to everybody else on YouTube. No ads, higher quality videos, and a private comment section over there, and that also gives you access to the Tech Deals private Discord. So if you're able to support the channel directly, which I understand not everybody is, but if you are, it is certainly greatly appreciated, especially for all the work it takes to make these videos. Now on to my thoughts for these cards. It is worth noting that what a card does today at the end of 2019 versus what a card will do for the next 3 years are two extremely different things. I mentioned earlier in the video about how an RTX 2060 will play current games at 1440p just fine. You might have to adjust the details a little bit in the top 1% of games, but by and large, pretty much everything plays at 1440p today on an RTX 2060. But it's not necessarily going to do that for the next 3 years. In fact, all games are probably not going to do that on a 2060 Super. You have to overbuy your video card for what it is you want to accomplish if you want to have any longevity out of it. Because every single year, games get more demanding and more complex, and the texture resolution goes up and the world detail goes up. I tested Ghost Recon Wildlands. That's because I benchmarked it before Ghost Recon Breakpoint came out. It's now come out. I will switch to it for my benchmark suite going forward, but it wasn't here. Ghost Recon Wildlands is a 3-year-old game, almost 3 years old. So that game runs really well. But Breakpoint will not run as well. Far Cry New Dawn is sort of the full-paid DLC to Far Cry 5, but it does in fact run slower than Far Cry 5. The next Far Cry game that comes out will do the same thing. The next Assassin's Creed game that comes out, the next Tomb Raider game that comes out, it all requires just a bit more. Now, it is true that you can turn down the detail settings, but did you really buy a $400 or a $500 video card so you could run it medium detail just 18 months after you bought the card? As crazy as this is going to sound to some of you, if you want longevity at 1440p at high to ultra detail in AAA games, this is not a crazy purchase. On a dollar cost per frame per second, no, this does not make a lot of sense. The 2060 Super is a much better value dollar cost per frame per second today than a 2080 Super. But if you have to replace it in 2 years because it no longer runs the latest games, but the 2080 lasts you another year, it didn't suddenly become the best deal, but it stopped being as bad a deal as those charts look. If you get 50% more time out of this card, okay, $700 is more than 50% more expensive, and of course you could resell this card and it has value. But some of that is lost in transaction. If you go sell this card on eBay and buy the next card in 2 years, and you have to pull it out and mess with your system and you just worry about anything, that has a cost associated to it. If you spend an extra $300 to buy this for $700 today, you gain a boost to performance and you push out into the future when you have to upgrade. To some people, that's worth a premium. To some people, it's not. And of course, how long any given card is going to last is going to depend entirely upon your resolution, detail settings, and game selection. If you play Fortnite and Overwatch and Apex, and you play games like that, this is not necessary for 1440p. A 2060 Super, or, even though it's not in the charts here, or an RX 5700 XT will do those for 1440p for years to come. So it just comes down to, are you playing esports games, casual games, or are you playing the latest AAA graphically demanding games? That's a question only you can answer, but if you overbuy your card and you push out into the future, that's a deal of a different sort. Now, I mentioned the 2080 Super. The 2080 Ti is a deal of a completely different sort. If you play games at 4K and you want to play AAA games at 4K, it's kind of the 2080 Ti or bust. You can absolutely play games, even Gears 5 and Shadow of the Tomb Raider, at 4K on less than a 2080 Ti. But you gotta mess with the detail settings and you're already buying a card that's end of life for that job. The next generation of games that come out next year, Christmas, 12 months from now, are already gonna be struggling. And then the year after that, forget it. Are you really gonna spend $500 on a video card that's already barely at its limit, that already requires tweaking? You can, but don't play at 4K if that's your budget. If $500 is your budget, I wouldn't play those kinds of games at 4K. You can always play them. It's worth noting, if you have a 4K monitor or 4K television, 1080p scales perfectly to 4K. You don't have to play every game at your monitor's native resolution. That's actually a completely fair point. 4K in Fortnite will actually run pretty well on a $500 card. You can always play your AAA games at 1080p and get spectacular performance and years of use out of them. So that's something to consider. I do want to thank you all for watching this very, very long video between the benchmarks, my initial analysis, and some of my extra thoughts there I added at the end. It certainly made the video longer, but I hope it added value to you guys. I hope you found it interesting or thoughtful, or perhaps it stimulated a thought that you hadn't previously considered upon card choice. Of course, if you just want to play games at 1080p, you don't need any of these. I've done several videos lately showing that even $200 graphics cards do that just fine. These are sort of the premium end for those of you who want a premium experience. Like this video if you like it, share it with your friends if you love it. Remember, subscribe to my channel with that big, huge red button directly below. Questions, comments, thoughts, feedback, suggestions, you know where the comment section is. I can't reply to everybody, but I do read them all. Links in the video description as always. Please consider following me on Twitter. Hit that bell notification icon to be notified when new videos come out, because otherwise YouTube won't tell you. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see all of you next time.